All right. Good morning. We are live on the Connect the Dots Web Tech Talk Show. Thank you to everyone who has made some time this morning to join the show, especially those out on the West Coast. We know it's a little bit early. This is Connect the Dots, and it's our bi-weekly Web Tech Talk Show where we do our best to demystify and chat about web technologies in a kind of really down-to-earth way. We always have a special guest. We lifted the show from the car guys. So I just love the idea where there's some folks who really understood complex topics, but made themselves available to answer questions and just really be of service to customers and colleagues out there. So let's get started today. We're super fortunate to have the team from SearchStax join us, Nadjya and Samir. I know you guys may be joining from the West Coast as well. Samir, thanks for getting up early. Nadjya, nice to see you. Today we're going to be talking about and myth busting everything to do with site search technology. And maybe I'll just ask Nadjya, maybe if you want to introduce SearchStax and tell us a little bit about the business and what you guys are up to these days.
Hi. Okay. Well, welcome. And I'm so happy to be here. SearchStax is a search experience company. So our focus is all about search. That's our history. And what's really cool about SearchStax is we started understanding at the atomic level what is search through the infrastructure. We've since built up and have a website search called Site Search. And that's allowed us to sort of get very deep into different websites, ranging from higher ed to healthcare to other sort of verticals. And yeah, it's a very exciting time for us. And our opportunity today is to talk a lot about why search matters. And coming from a CMO perspective, I have a real personal connection to this because I've been through many website redesigns, hundreds of thousands of dollars where search kind of came at the end. And we were talking about this before we went live. That disconnect on the value and what it is, I think is a great opportunity to explore today, because I think that's something that I've learned in my tenure at SearchStax. So.
Awesome. And I think that was one of the reasons why this was important for me as well. Our customers and decision makers are typically CMOs that have been kind of tasked with a large technical or digital project where maybe some of the underlying technologies aren't necessarily that well understood. And as we were saying earlier, it always seems to come up kind of last in the project architecture where search comes in. And I want to really elevate that and communicate how important it is to be thinking through the site search technology before the project starts. And I know we've got some great talking points here. But one of the ideas that we had is we were going to do a little bit of myth busting. And I thought that was a great way of framing it. Maybe just before we get started, I wanted to just say thanks again to everyone for joining us. We've got Marie and Natalie that are producing the show behind the scenes. They're going to be collecting anyone's questions and posting them on our channel so we can see them here. And we're going to do our best to answer any questions you might have. But we have an underlying narrative of the show that we'll get right into. And we hope that this is really valuable information for anyone out there who's considering search technology. So maybe I'll just kind of set the idea of some myth busting here. And Samir, do you want to kind of jump in with one of the myths we need to bust?
Well, sure. Thanks, Chris. It's great to join you for today's episode. I think for those of you, my name is Samir, CEO of SearchStax. Spent several years software space, helping kind of businesses think about search, and really kind of not as a feature, right, but as a strategic growth lever. I think when you talk about kind of busting some myths, why don't we kick things off? Let me think, let me ask our audience this, right? If a customer's first and most meaningful interaction, right, with your website is through your search bar, today, right, what kind of an experience do you deliver today? Right? I mean, it's a kind of food for thought. A lot of people don't actually think about that, right? And if you really ask a lot of people actually, I would say the first myth that a lot of people think about is all search is created equal, right? And is that a myth? I mean, I think that's a myth.
I know it's a myth,
right?
Because I've seen the search bar that's been kind of neglected out in a corner of a website somewhere to really robust, informative, intuitive, kind of in-journey search almost, where it's kind of facilitating where I want to get to on the site faster. Maybe it's opening doors to things that I hadn't considered but are in alignment with my journey on the site. And I know that your tooling is quite in depth and quite customizable. Maybe you want to just talk about a little bit of, like, what are the key factors in choosing search technology? Like, what is the mindset of that decision maker?
Yeah, I think, if you think about, right, from a, people think, right, all search is created equal. I think that the truth couldn't be further, right? This couldn't be further from the truth, because there's a world of difference, right? There is, what people are used to, which is commerce search, right, which drives transactions. Everyone's used to that, right? We open up Amazon.com and other websites and get us straight to kind of what we're looking for, versus there is content search, right? When we think about it, people asking questions, people going to websites to find information. And those two are very different kind of search paradigms. When I started SearchStax, I noticed that a lot of businesses were underserved, right? And specifically in an area where on the website search side of things, even today, if you look at a lot of website search, most companies are stuck with basic out-of-the-box search tool, whatever is coming out of their, CMS, DXP platforms, or there's an extreme where they've heavily invested in a very customized, handcrafted solution, super hard to maintain and super hard to kind of change, right, from a marketing team's perspective. And a lot of times, businesses face a challenge that poor quality of search results, lack of insights into search, or ability for teams to actually make changes. Those are challenges that they face today. So I think from a technology perspective, this is kind of what we've been focused on, right? Is how do we bring an accessible technology, right, to the hands of the marketing teams, so that they can make content search one of their strategic levers, right, growth levers. And that's where our focus has been.
Awesome. I think I know the amount of time that we spend crafting taxonomies and navigation systems and all of these, I guess, the experiences on the site that eventually help you wind up consuming the content that you want. But that's only half the story. There's a whole cohort. I often think of it as the person walking into Home Depot, and I can either go up to a person with the apron on and say, where are the screwdrivers, and go right there and find it, which is representative of search and a great search. Or I can, and it's a little bit more about me, I like kind of wandering around and seeing the signage and kind of cascading through the taxonomy of information and finding out where I want to go. But it's often overlooked, kind of the power of a really great suite of search technologies. Do you want to talk a little bit about where AI falls into all of this? I know it's kind of just contemporary topic right now. What are your thoughts on what's going on?
Yeah, well, we are 9 minutes into the episode, and we've finally spoken the AI word. Right?
Of course,
of course, it's look, AI. It's the button, right? It's the magic button that'll give everything. Look, AI is not new, right? AI can certainly enhance search, right? But it's not set it and forget it. I've spent over 20 years in the search space. This is, I believe, my second AI wave, and I've worked with folks who've been, in the search space, and for them, I believe it's third, right, wave of kind of the AI technologies, right? And every wave have actually done a significant improvement, right, from a user experience perspective, and added kind of the capabilities into the search paradigm. Super excited about that, right? I think this wave of large language models, small language models, and the stuff that's happening, compared to machine learning, right, that happened in the previous wave, is going to elevate and enhance search. Now, that being said, I think great search has always happened right at the intersection of user insights, right? What do your customers want? What is their intent? And what do they expect? Content, without content, right information that is accessible, search is kind of handicapped. And then finally is the technology, right?
Mhm.
So what we're seeing now is definitely enhancements in the technology side, on the AI and LLMs. I think people forget about the user insights and content and aspects of search, which are super critical. So, at SearchStax, right, our focus is practical AI. How we think about, practical AI is, yes, you have your core search, which is your classic, algorithms, machine learning, and then we think about now the LLMs. But then I think that what people forget about is the, human intelligence, people who have built kind of the depth in their industry and the knowledge, and then how do you bring all these things together along with the insights to deliver best experience, right? And then you have to make sure from a website experience perspective, there is transparency and control, right? And trust is a critical factor for a lot of websites. And you have to make sure that the results are relevant, unbiased, and so that the businesses can actually, or consumers can actually trust what they're seeing on the search results. So AI will have a lot of impact, and super excited, right? Because it's actually going to push the search technology even further. And in addition, super excited that it's actually bringing search again in the mainstream.
Cool. You mentioned a couple things just in passing there. One was kind of around implementation. The other one was around insights. Now, did you want to speak a little bit to kind of maybe the underknown value of search, which is the insights that gets passed back to marketers?
All right. I'd actually like to even start with the myth busting at this level, which you kind of talked about. Like your trip to Home Depot is like the real world example of like what's happening on websites. It's the virtual equivalent, right? So right now, like when I think about my experience with websites, a lot of times we spend a ton of money on figuring out the happy path, the navigation. Like, what were the 3 pages that were prior to a conversion? That's like one of the things. But what we're seeing now is there's been a shift. Forrester did some research. 43% of visitors now go directly to the search bar. So your happy path just got blown up. Your navigation that you spent all this energy, all this time.
Right.
And it's that behavioral thing. It's like, I want to go straight to search. And what's super interesting is like, when you look at who they are, right? Gen Z is even more likely to favor search. I mean, this is a generation that grew up with phones, right? They go straight to search, right? And what's amazing, I was just at a conference a couple of weeks ago. Gen Z is going to be 27% of the workforce starting in 2025.
Good point. Yeah.
So expectations are changing, right? And I think that's really important. And you have to think of search now as your digital front door, right? If that's how people are coming in, how do you make that great experience right off the bat? So this is your Home Depot example. You don't want to go, wandering down aisle 13 looking for it, and you want to be able to connect to that quickly. There's a second thing that I think is really important, and search is not just that little bar on your home page. This is like where your highest intent visitors are going. Okay, there's been a lot of studies that people that come in through search are 2 to 3 times more likely to convert to whatever that next action is. It could be to look at this, it could be book an appointment, it could be whatever. That's like they're talking to you. And now for marketers, you have to be listening. This is really high. The new like looking at a valuable page, that web results page, that CTR on that page is super, super important because it's not created equal. It's a high intent set of visitors that are there. And you have to be able to take these signals and do something with it quickly, be responsive to it. And I think that's another shift for marketing people. A lot of times people have been dependent on IT organizations to say, please make a change. I see this. I want to promote this. And I think there's this sort of the behavioral shift that's happening with marketing teams. So those are sort of 2 top line things that I think are important to sort of share about like why at the very highest level. And if I can keep going, there's like even another one that
Please, yeah, this is wonderful.
This is what I live. You guys talked about content, right? Like, so Samir talked about the technology on content. I think the really the myth we're busting is if I could create great content, visitors will come streaming in. Well, we already know how hard that is. With B2B, every visitor is important, right? You spend a lot of energy and time figuring out the right channel, bringing them to your site. It's kind of like for all the DXPs and CMSs out there, search is kind of like the last mile for content, right? It's like if you created all this wonderful content, you have all, and by the way, a big amount of your budget might be around creating content, right? Like for different purposes. If it's not findable, it's not serving its purpose. And then when we think about like, does it inform your content strategy? It tells you exactly what people are looking for. So you may have gaps, like Samir kind of alluded to that. Like search is not just about a reaction, it's also proactive in telling you like what you're missing and what you need to add. From a university, it could be a program that people are looking for. It can also tell you a little bit about so like opportunities for businesses and then how can you leverage that and manage it? So that AI angle, for example, as a marketer, we always want to have a hand in how people have the experience on your website, right? I'm sure you've worked with plenty of marketers with opinions because God forbid the market have an opinion. But you can also use that as a consolidation point. You know, how do you want to sort of bring together different information sources and take that next action? So there are things you can even curate from a search experience that will help make it a much more fulfilling and much more effective use of your visitors' time. So I think those are three things from a marketing perspective that I found super interesting because I didn't know that before I came to SearchStax. I thought, okay, that's great. But it's when you dig a little bit deeper, then you realize it's marketing used to think of search as a fail. Like I did terrible and that's why they went there. Now your users are going straight there. So there isn't that paradigm anymore.
Gotcha. Yeah.
There's another way of thinking about it, right? I think since, similar to how Nadjya talked about it, think about, companies want to make sure they're always wanting to make sure that they're closer to the customer, right? And customer obsession is there in every part of the organization, and they're listening to what the customers are saying. What better place to tell you what users and your customers are talking about than a search bar? That is one place on your website where they're actually utilizing, their sensory kind of, touch and voice, right?
Giving you input, right?
To actually, type in and tell you what they're looking for.
Yeah.
As opposed to Google telling what they're like. They are going to your website in the search box and telling you what they're looking for. And if you're, if you are a customer obsessed business, and if you don't have the, capabilities to kind of understand what they're typing, you have a lost opportunity there.
Yeah. And just to add on that, this is first party data, right? So this is not inferred. This is actual first party data, which everyone is trying to harness because that's the most valuable insight you can have about tuning your web experience to your visitors.
Amazing. I'm once again, I just to let everyone know, if you just join us, we have SearchStax as our special guest today. They are a web search technology best-in-class application. We're going to talk a little bit about how you actually implement the tooling and what's involved there. But we do have a question from the audience here from Paul. Paul asks, how do you know what people are searching for? And is that recorded during a search?
I think great question, right? And this is, that by, we have technology, right? I mean, SearchStax actually has an analytics capability where whenever people are interacting with a search bar, we actually record everything that they're typing, and not only what they're typing, but also after they've performed a search, what are they interacting on, right? And that that is all saved into our software, and then we have the dashboards, right, where the marketing teams or the content teams or the development teams can actually glean, right, those insights and can actually do something about it.
Could I ask a question? Yeah, let's say I was searching for screwdrivers. Is there a way to use that data to trigger kind of a personalization engine or something like that for the next wave of content that I experience? That'd be really
Absolutely. I think this is what we call, right, in our world, optimization, marketing optimization tools, right? So, what the capability provides, right, from a software perspective is you can either look at individual searches, or you can look at a pattern, right, of searches, or, think about an old way rules, right? You can create rules and say, if then else, then I want to make sure certain content is highlighted on the top, right? Okay. And I think Nadjya can speak to that a lot more. Recently, one of our customers, Bridgewater University, I think the president and the dean, essentially, they wanted to make sure that when someone was searching for wellness, right, within the organization, there was specific wellness oriented kind of issues that were, topics that were content was written for, and those always came on top so that they could guide, right, students who are looking for for kind of for the wellness aspects can be redirected there, right? It's a very common paradigm. People mostly think about it, or at least from a consumer perspective, right, mostly think about ads, but that technology can actually be very powerful for guiding your users to kind of where you want them to go.
Yeah, and just to build on that for Bridgewater, they started with wellness and they moved into like addressing some, a lot of campuses where students are struggling with sort of mental health issues, things like physical safety. They created almost like a bar that was for any crisis related issues. So when people would type in things like crisis, help, emergency, they would have one place that they could go to get the help they needed. And that was a really important thing because it consolidated it all into one place. And this is a great use of like search in service of values and community, right? Because if you can bring together, and they have another example for different events they put on, but that from that wellness to crisis, by getting those signals and then creating an asset that people could use because they knew that this was a hot topic for their students on campus.
Mm-hmm. Really important. Again, thanks to folks who are joining us at this time of day on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram. I mentioned in passing that a cohort of listeners now and in the future to the podcast and the video are CMOs, and they're part of their challenge as an agency supporting them is kind of figuring out, how do I implement this stuff? How complicated is it? How do I get down? And this is a challenge with all this kind of headless architecture. Like, how do I get down to a total cost of this thing? But maybe just starting, how do you implement SearchStax, and is it dependent on what CMS you're using? I understand that it's independent and fits really nicely into everything.
Yeah, no. So I would classify into, let's call it a myth. All search requires IT teams, right? Because, we hear that a lot, right? Like, oh, search requires IT team. You even heard Nadjya say that search is an IT problem. I need to go to an engineer. I don't want to deal with it because I want this is my IT thing. I actually think while this was true in the past, I think modern search solutions have flipped the paradigm completely. At SearchStax, we've worked really hard to make search, more agile, right? So today, your marketing teams can manage and optimize search without waiting for IT. So from a search perspective, right, what we're doing is we've actually created a lot more automation, right, in our search software that you can get to a kind of a modern, good kind of search fairly quickly without a lot of implementation time. Your traditional search engines, or majority of kind of how people think about search is, oh, search is going to be a $500,000 project that I need to undertake. Right. Those days are for the past. Right now, software technology, especially cloud technologies, and companies like SearchStax are completely changing that paradigm. You don't need heavyweight, complex search solutions. You can have very lightweight, easy to implement, and then solutions like SearchStax that don't require IT once it's been implemented, because the control and the power, like typically what we're used to SaaS solutions, have been given back to the marketing teams and the content teams, so that they can continue to improve kind of the search experience that they are mostly in control of. And IT's responsibility is to make sure they are choosing the right solution, right, for the job. And they're, as part of the choosing the right solution, they are, ideally not be the gate, they are the gatekeepers, but it's essentially they're helping facilitate so that they've made the decision for this tool, but then they're not kind of dependent after that, right? They're creating a dependency after that. They're really empowering the marketing and the content teams to be self-sufficient, right? And to be, what we call kind of, to make them more agile, right? From a speed and delivery perspective. I think one of the things before you started the show, you talked about, efficiency, right? Marketing teams are asking for efficiency, do more with less. That's how you do more with less, right? Is once the solution is implemented, my team has the power to make those changes within minutes. I don't want a 2-week sprint cycle to make that implementation into the search box. I want changes.
Yeah, from what I take what you're saying, it's straightforward to implement and doesn't require the ongoing need for technical support. You integrate it into your platform, you mature it from a marketing perspective, and then maybe you need to build out more complex use cases, but you're certainly not inhibited from the day-to-day, I guess, power of search by having to have a technical team.
Yeah, I used to talk to, we talked to one of our customers and I asked them a simple question. 2 simple questions I typically ask whenever I walk into a customer conversation. A, how do you know what people are searching for? And 80% of the people say, we don't.
Right.
And then B, I ask them, if you were to make a change onto your search experience, how long does it take for you to do that today? And they're like, I don't know. I have to go and my IDQ, and it has to compete with all the 50 other things that are part of the backlog. And then it'll finally make the drain. And it takes, the cycle time sometimes takes weeks or months. And at SearchStax, we've completely changed the paradigms on those two.
Awesome. I wanted to make sure that we had a little bit of time for a mini case study. I think something might resonate well with the folks that are listening in, thinking, I don't know, what if this was me? And I know that you have a special event coming up too, but maybe Nadjya, do you want to just talk a little bit about Bridgewater? I know that was something that you wanted to share and may resonate with some folks that are listening in.
Yeah, definitely. We didn't bury the lead on that one because we went straight into what stories on the crisis management side. But so let me share a little bit about Bridgewater. Bridgewater is about 10,000 students. They are one of the oldest and largest state universities in Massachusetts. And, what's interesting when you look at higher ed, for example, as a vertical, there's many constituents you have to serve. You've got your students, your prospective students, your faculty, your staff, so many different sort of stakeholders. And what they found was, search was a core part of their experience. They were tracking that, and it's growing over 25% and growing. There's a search during any of these different interactions that they have on their website, but they didn't. Before we came in, they didn't really have visibility to what people were doing, the tooling, the analytics. They were using Google Search Appliance. So that sometimes, that's a starting point for a lot of higher ed, especially. They wanted to have better visibility to their content gaps. We talked a little bit about that. They wanted to know what people were looking for that they weren't getting a result for. They wanted more optimizations, agility, that we've just talked about it, like having marketing be more responsive to the intent. And they wanted it to work with their Drupal website. So there was like some different components they asked us to sort of work with. I think we haven't talked about, but there are some interesting metrics that you can now that come from search. So for example, there were 3 areas that they were able to track. And so I'll share a little bit more like what they are and what some of the benchmarks are and what that means. Okay. So like one of the things they were able to start tracking now were average searches per session. Right now it's about 1.5 and a typical benchmark is less than 3.
Okay.
What that means is like how quickly are they able to find what they need in the first 1 to 2 searches, right? Because again, like the criminal element is losing them, right? So you want to make sure that you're finding that quickly. Then you've got click-through rate. Did they take that next action? They were able to track, I think their click-through rate now is around 48%, and a benchmark of what's good is anything above 35%. And that tells you about relevance.
Mm-hmm.
For these users, did they click through without multiple searches? Again, so that click-through rate is really important. And average click position. So they were able to move that to 2.8. A benchmark is anything under 3. And they find it without scrolling down, so you want to make sure the most relevant searches what you're looking for based on what signals you've given show up on top. So what I think super exciting about this is not a lot of people think about like, what is all the information that your search results page is telling you, right? And these are metrics now that they were able to track, and that helped inform like where their gaps were, and then allowed them to put together, different curated sort of call to actions for other pages that consolidated the gaps, of things they found. Either they would fill in the gaps, directly on the different parts of their site, or put together a more consolidated page that sort of assembled this set of searches that people were looking for example, crisis management. So I love this story because this is a university that is not a big university, right? I mean, they're an established university, but the insights that they're getting is so much more than where they came from. So many different sort of companies or institutions don't even realize that value of what information you can get now from your search pages.
Well, this case study seems like it could have a life of its own. And from what I understand, you actually have an event coming up where you're going to be digging deeper into this. And we're going to share in the comments area underneath how folks can find that and join you for a real deep dive there. I think it's got a lot of value.
Yeah, it's not me, but actually Bridgewater will be speaking. So I think what's really great is if you want to hear it from the organizations that are gone through this transformation themselves and what they experienced, and then ask questions. I think great if you can join us December 10th.
Yeah, that sounds super cool. So we'll leave contact information if you want to get a hold of SearchStax. I highly recommend you reach out. And if you're considering search, go have a demo. If you're looking for implementation, you can always call Dotfusion. But really, love you guys. Thanks for making time this morning. We're out of time. It goes by pretty quickly. If anyone has any questions, please leave some follow-up notes. Thanks to Natalie and Marie, who are producing the show behind the scenes. And we'll also have this information ready as a video and a podcast in the future. Just want to say thanks and happy holidays to everyone. This is the end of the season, and a real honor to have you both join on the show this morning. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Chris, and